Welcome to Movie Heaven, Movie Hell with me, Simon Aitken, and
I'm Keith Eyles, and we are both independent filmmakers who enjoy discussing movies and related media. And for this series of special episodes celebrating 40 years of Star Wars, we are very pleased to welcome back filmmaker William McLaughlan. So welcome back to the show, William.
Thanks very much for having me back. Hello, everybody. Hello again. Hope you enjoyed the last one that I was doing. I'm interested to hear what Keith and Simon are going to say about Star Wars.
Indeed, yes. Well, we had you on before where we were talking about the on-screen DC universe, which itself is a very big topic. And we've obviously got you back now for an equally huge topic to talk about aspects of the Star Wars saga. Today, we're going to be focusing more on the prequel movies, the Star Wars prequel movies, which I guess, from your point of view, is that the Star Wars you sort of grew up with, William? You're a little bit younger than me and Simon.
I'm OT all the way. I think probably for me, I was watching those films on VHS on a regular basis. Maybe strangely less A New Hope and more Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi. But also, when I think I was about 8 or 9, maybe, they did the special edition re-release of the original trilogy. And I went and saw them in the cinema. And that was, I think, quite a lucky kind of experience. I mean, I hate filmmakers going back and sorting things in their films. If you're a filmmaker and you do it, fair enough if you think that makes your film better, but just wash your hands. Once your film's complete, it's complete. So adding the bits that Lucas added in gave nothing to me. But I would say the original trilogy or the special edition trilogy, they're my films. Saying that, I love the prequels, so it'll be interesting to talk to you about them.
All right, guys. So, Phantom Menace. When did you see it?
William, you go first. You're the guest.
Okay. Thanks very much. So I saw it. I must have been 14, I think, when I saw that. It's a terrifying memory there. What did I think of the Phantom Menace? It's a strange film. They obviously went, and did a different sort of Star Wars movie. I love the fact that George Lucas directed them. I went and saw it in a multiplex with my friend Duncan Scott and my mum, and I think my sister as well. And I think all of us thoroughly enjoyed it. I think that's the sort of thing that people listening to your podcast will be clamoring about or scratching their heads about. But prior to the Phantom Menace coming out, it did have a massive trailer campaign, and I think the film, did present things in a kind of new, fresh way. Certainly the world building, I think, was absolutely incredible and a brilliant development from the original three.
Keith?
Okay. Well, I mean, at this point, when it came out, I'd finished film school, and I was still living in the US at the time. It was a bit of a funny time in life for me, though, because I was about to, I was having visa issues, and I was having to prepare to come back to the UK. So I was probably in a bit of a funny place emotionally anyway. But I'd got tickets to see it. Obviously, there'd been a massive build-up to this, huge build-up to this. And I actually had tickets to see it twice on opening day. I was going with my then girlfriend of the time, and also with my buddies. So I was going to see it twice in one day. Yeah, my initial reaction was one of, I've got to be honest, mass disappointment. And I kind of went back to see it the second time, thinking to myself, oh, no, I was obviously in the wrong frame of mind. It must have been better than that. And I went back to see it again and actually struggled to stay engaged with it. So I have to admit, my experience as being a massive Star Wars fan, I mean, an uber Star Wars geek, and having enjoyed, the re-releases of the original trilogy a couple of years earlier when I just started film school. To see that, I was actually somewhat disappointed, and it did take me a long time to kind of go back with different eyes and accept the film for what it was.
Well, with myself, I was actually working at a cinema at the time. I was 23, and I'd been working in the film industry for about over a year, and the sort of job centre had caught up with me. I had to get a proper job. So I was working in what was called the Cinema Barnwood, next to Elstree Studios. So, in the home of Star Wars. And what we used to do was the projectionist would screen the film to test it, and the staff could sit in and watch it. So we were all looking forward to seeing it. We were going to see it the night before anybody else. And to start things off, our manager came up in front of the screen and then all had a go at us all. He accused everybody in the room. Yeah, seriously. He accused everybody in the room from stealing from him. His exact words were, "You're stealing the food out of my kid's mouth." And then he said, "We're never doing this again. We're never having one of these sort of preview screenings again," which was bullshit. But he was trying to make a point.
Working in a cinema, that's the biggest bonus, is that you get to watch the movies.
Yeah, I mean, we get to see films for free anyway. When we weren't working, so that wasn't a problem. But to be able to sit in with the projectionist and watch the sort of test screening, that was off the cards, off the table now. And what a film to do it in front of.
Yeah, I was going to say that's a slightly unreasonable intro, but there you go.
So yes, we're all in a state of shock, and Star Wars comes up. My initial impression was I enjoyed it, but there was something nagging at the back of my head. I'm not quite sure what it was. I mean, I enjoyed the pod race, and I enjoyed the final battle, but the rest of it, I was kind of like, well, okay, it's a lot different, because I used to hang out with a lot of friends who were big into Star Wars, and I used to go to the conventions, the small conventions, as before they blew up. And, it was fun talking to other Star Wars fans and speculating what Episode 1 was going to be. I actually had met a few people who had worked on the film, and of course they were all being tight-lipped about it. They said, "Oh yeah, it's going to be great. It's battles and sea battles and all this kind of stuff." And you think, wow, this is, And so, yeah, finally watching it, you're kind of like, I'm not sure about this. And I went to the cinema again to see it. And again, I enjoyed the pod race and I enjoyed the final battle. But the rest of it kind of wasn't sitting with me. And I bought it on VHS, and I watched it a few times. And then, that was it. I never really watched it again. And I haven't really watched it since, to tell the truth. I mean, I can tell you everything that happens in it, but it's a lot of stuff that doesn't make sense.
I think that's you're hitting the nail on the head. I think he got really excited, made part one. Nobody reeled him in. Nobody edited him. Nobody helped refine his ideas, and it's just out there.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah. I mean,
yes.
The making of on the DVD, which I did see, you can clearly see that there was a lot of people there who didn't agree with him, but didn't say anything, because they were all there because of the love of Star Wars. Oh, we love Star Wars. I mean, Rick McLaughlan, his producer, he had sort of brought on to to do the prequels from doing the Young Indiana Jones Chronicles, and he was a total yes guy. I mean, every time he came up on in interviews and everything, he was like, George. He was always pushing Lucas's point of view and agenda. So he wasn't somebody who was going to say, actually, maybe you should do this. He wasn't a Gary Kurtz, which Lucas kind of needs.
Yeah, no, I would agree with that. I mean, this, I said I didn't sort of initially enjoy it. I was impressed with the scope of it all, for sure. But it just, it just didn't feel like Star Wars to me. It felt, suddenly it just seemed lighter, and there was suddenly like fart jokes and stuff in Star Wars, and I was like, oh, really? And I was a bit sort of taken back by that. And I think, like you've both sort of alluded to, the difference on this film as opposed to the previous trilogy, the other projects, was, George is a great creator, a wonderful creator of these characters and universes. But in the other films, as film is, it was a collaboration. Whereas with this, suddenly he had built his empire and, had sort of almost total control over everything. And was that necessarily a good thing? You're right. Working with someone who's a yes man, you need somebody to challenge your ideas and help them evolve more. And some of Phantom Menace, although a technological breakthrough for sure, but in terms of the actual storytelling and characters, it didn't feel completely evolved. And I think that's possibly one of the issues with it. Plus that issue that we've talked about before about prequels. and obviously knowing where this is going, and you're, as fans, your headcanon kind of has expectations from prequels, which maybe certainly in this film weren't necessarily met. Maybe. So
I think it's interesting when you're talking about headcanon, because I think this is a problem that I suffer from when I go and see films, where I've got an expectation of what I'm going to get. My gripes with the Phantom Menace, now as a sort of, objective point of view, I think I've got two huge issues with it. Firstly, the midichlorians. Dreadful.
I know.
That's an edit that's easy to take out and remove, but that's totally the wrong route. And secondly, the Trade Federation droids. That's so Deus Ex mechanical. It just is really clunky. I don't actually dislike the story in The Phantom Menace, but I think that they could have made it a lot more gripping and interesting and really increased the stakes for the characters personally if they hadn't quite spent so much time with those droids. And they're just, I don't know, it strikes me as, they put them in to sell toys, which is fine. That's the sort of film that this is. But it definitely hurt the film, I think.
Yeah, I mean, the other problem I have with it is there's no jeopardy. I mean, in the original trilogy, the jeopardy was that the Empire was going to crush the rebellion.
Yeah.
In this, the Jedi are very powerful, so powerful that, they're undefeatable. They just go along, wave their lightsabers around and cut things to pieces, cut the robots to pieces, and they just go, Roger, Roger. And that's it, And little inconsistencies like at the beginning, they have force speed where you've got those rolling droids that come up with the shields and they go, down the corridor. Yet when they could have really used that at the end with the Darth Maul battle, suddenly they can't use it. It's like Obi-Wan has suddenly forgotten how to do it. Also, the other thing as well was that Obi-Wan should have been the lead. He was actually, on the side while old Qui-Gon Jinn was getting to know Anakin Skywalker. And it's like, well, really, it's the relationship between Obi-Wan and Anakin that we want to see, not, a character who, thanks to the soundtrack, told us was going to die.
Yes. Yeah. No, I mean, definitely the metachlorines thing was we're not saying anything new. I know that's frustrated millions of fans, across the planet over the years. Yeah. But this whole, in the original trilogy, the Force was ambiguous enough that it wasn't explained by any science or anything of that nature. It was this mystical thing that some people had a stronger affinity to than others, etc. But when they kind of made it then about science and kind of putting it in a box almost, seemed to detract a lot from the possibilities and obviously the mystery of the Force and the Jedi, and that was obviously a major disappointment.
Sorry, I was going to say as well, and then they don't use it in the rest of the prequels because they know they have a Sith amongst their midst. So what's a good way of finding out if you've got a Force user is check his midichlorian count. Well, they don't decide to do that, do they?
Exactly.
The continuity within those three films is ropey.
Yeah.
I think what I hate about the midichlorians is that it breaks the fundamental filmmaking rule, which is show, don't tell. And if you think about like Luke training on Dagobah and Empire Strikes Back, even though they sort of talk about the Force and so on, I don't think any of that matters because you see the two characters using it. You see Mark Hamill's performance, he's struggling, and then Yoda, obviously a puppet, but he doesn't struggle as much. Awesome. It's clear as day. Even children who aren't paying any attention to what's being said can watch that and get it. Whereas you bring in the midichlorians, it's like, nah, gone.
Yeah.
Not interested.
Yeah. And such a throwaway scene as well. I mean,
Oh, very much so. Yeah. It's very, very. In fact, the film, even though it's got some sort of amazing action sequences in it, it's also quite surprising how slow the film is in places. There are a lot of scenes that are actually, particularly for a child audience, I'd imagine, quite boring. With lots of exposition and just not much happening, and obviously a very stilted type of acting as well, because that's how George likes those sort of things. But it's I mean, I'm being quite hard on it, I know, but I'm just going off of I'm trying to put my memory back to what my emotion was at the time. And, I know they make a whole joke about this in like comedy shows like Spaced or whatever, with the character being depressed after having seen the Phantom Menace. But I did, as a Star Wars fan, sort of feel let down by this sort of first chapter. And I just thought, well, I hope it's going to get better. Because I didn't think it was great, is the honest thing. And even watching it since, I accept it for what it is and where it is. And of course, it's officially part of the canon, etc. But it's not the most exciting film. It's not like the other films where I can put them on any time and I'll watch them. I never have a sort of burning desire to think, oh, I know, I'll stick the Blu-ray of Phantom Menace in and watch that this afternoon. That just doesn't happen for me with this film, I'm afraid.
Yeah, it's kind of telling when, if you want the all singing, all dancing versions of the films, you have to get the prequels as well. You can't. Can I just have like the all singing, all dancing original trilogy? And just skip.
No, there's too many Phantom Menace discs still in circulation. You have to get some of them.
Yeah.
What do you guys think about? I don't think you can talk about the Phantom Menace and not mention Jar Jar Binks. Let's have a quick trip down memory lane.
Misa think we need to forget him.
Absolute terribly big misstep in the whole trilogy. I remember again the run up to Star Wars, the Phantom Menace coming out. There was an exhibition down at the Barbican, and you had these sort of behind the scenes videos. And again, they were pushing Jar Jar. They were saying, Jar Jar is a totally CGI created character. So you've never seen anything like this. He's going to be a big part of the trilogy. And then you saw what actually Jar Jar was, and Jar Jar was comic relief. And as much as we kind of had comic relief with the droids, we also, but the droids actually played a big part in the original trilogy. Jar Jar was just a complete moron that was just there, and and you can tell that. that Lucas kind of listened to audiences, that his involvement in the other two films became less. Even though I think his part in Attack of the Clones is a big fuck you to the audience. Yeah. I really do.
What he does in Attack of the Clones, only that he becomes a senator and then it's completely dialed right back.
Yes, but what he does in Attack of the Clones is he gives the powers to Palpatine so that he can raise his clone army. I think that kind of involvement, because technically the fall of the Republic is, down to Jar Jar. And Jar Jar being so easily persuaded to do it, there's this, when he's standing there in the office and there's Palpatine with one of his advisors, and it's like, oh, if only somebody was here that could help us. I know Senator Amidala would vote for us, and you can just see Jar Jar go, "Ooh, that's a good idea."
That's a very good impression.
Do you think Lucas changed his original concept of that story in Attack of the Clones based on the reception that Jar Jar got in Phantom Menace?
I think because, as you say, he's sort of now on the sideline. In the Phantom Menace, he was there in the center of the action. I mean, the whole sort of battle sequence with the Gungans and the droid army, where he's taking out droids by mistake.
Well, yeah, I mean, this is what I was going to say about it. Is that's part of the problem with it. I mean, George clearly loves this character and created him, and I don't know whether he was supposed to be like the prequels answer to Chewbacca or something, but the creation of him, and technically, the fact that they've created this character completely in CGI and all that, all very clever. But this is the problem. It became all sort of slapstick and accidental hero stuff. And there was a lot of that in Phantom Menace, even with Anakin, when he was piloting the ship and he's accidentally sort of pressing the wrong buttons and taking the bad guys out. And I'm thinking to myself, this is a far cry from Luke having to use the Force in the trenches to destroy the Death Star to all this kind of accidental hero slapstick humor crap, and I really hated that. I hate all that sort of hero by chance stuff. I mean,
well, there's no agency there.
Exactly, none at all. And this was the thing, and I actually do think George possibly did listen to or did take note of the fan reaction, because I haven't met many people that like Jar Jar Binks. A few, but very few people seem to feel that character fits into the Star Wars universe, because he's just a bit too Roger Rabbit, isn't he, for his own good?
Good analogy.
It's the wrong movie. It's the wrong movie, though, isn't it? It's you know what I mean. To have him in that universe just doesn't sort of feel right. But I guess very clever the way they did it all, but yeah, it didn't really work for me. I have to say, I found him massively irritating.
Yeah,
I feel sorry for Ahmed Best, who presumably thought he might have launched his career as a sort of that Andy Serkis-esque mocap actor, but yeah, not to be.
Well, yeah, because mocap actors really wasn't a thing back then. If anything, he was the first one, but unfortunately it was just a character that's reviled by most people, as you say. I've not met somebody who went, oh, I really like that Jar Jar Binks.
I think I'm going to get a Jar Jar Binks t-shirt, actually. I think that's going to be one for Christmas for the holidays. Jar Jar Binks. Definitely.
Wait. You never know. I never know what to expect from these podcasts. And one of the things I am slightly surprised about yet again is I thought you might be defending these prequels a bit more, William, than you are. So it's interesting.
Keith, just because it's crap doesn't mean I can't love it. I think probably the Phantom Menace is the worst, I would say. I really
agree.
like Attack of the Clones. I think it's really interesting as a sort of Hollywood movie. There's lots of stuff that I love about it. Just the look of that film. I think Phantom Menace is a little bit too kind of bright and fuzzy, and just the sort of state of the special effects aren't quite there. For me, Attack of the Clones nailed it, and bringing in Anakin Skywalker Reloaded, giving him the extra 20 years, it changed it for me. And when I saw Attack of the Clones, I was probably 18, I think. It was midnight in the largest cinema in the world at the time, tallest cinema in the world, in Renfrew Street in Glasgow. A big Cineworld had just opened up. And I loved Attack of the Clones. So many drunk Glaswegians. The whole cinema was packed. Anakin's having his nightmare, and people are, he's shouting about his mum and stuff like that. People were talking all the way through the film. It was much more like going to America and seeing something in the cinema than being in the UK. So I loved Attack of the Clones, and I think that's probably the one that I've watched the most.
I must admit, I had a similar experience as you, William, when I went to see it. I went to the preview screening at the Odeon Leicester Square. So, like, midnight screening, loads of Star Wars fans outside, all dressed up, got their lightsabers, all having a great laugh. We get in there, and Anthony Daniels there is to introduce the film. And I remember him trying to, rile up the crowd. So he's like, Star Wars. Everyone's, yeah. Empire Strikes Back. Yeah. Return of the Jedi. Yeah. Phantom Menace. And people started booing. Boo. Boo. And somebody shouted out, Jar Jar must die. And then Rick McCallum came on. And obviously between the two films, he'd gained a bit of weight. And funny enough, looked like my old cinema manager. And then started swearing at us. And I'm like, bloody hell, I'm having flashbacks here. Hence why I didn't go to a preview screening of Revenge of the Sith. You have guilt for every Star Wars prequel film you see because of the intro. The intro's built around guilt, yeah. I have to admit, for me, all of the prequels are a step in the right direction from the previous. So, Attack of the Clones, even though it's not without its problems, I think, but overall, I enjoyed it far more than I did Phantom Menace, and for me, it has far more watch appeal than Phantom Menace. So, I really liked where they started to take this. I liked the fact that, it focused more around the sort of love story, which was obviously going to be key and integral to the character of Anakin Skywalker and his sort of journey to becoming Darth Vader. So I thought that was all handled well. They gave Obi-Wan, really something to do in this one, sort of like you said, Simon, moving him sort of less from the side character, more into the sort of central role with this one. And it did feel that things had developed a lot, in terms of their relationship in that sort of, 10 years or whatever it's supposed to be between the first two films. My issue with Attack of the Clones was there was still a little bit of the sort of accidental hero stuff going on in places, and there was a few sort of corny one-liners and stuff that didn't particularly work. And the other thing was, again, I'm impressed with how the technology had jumped from the first film to the next, etc. But I did sort of feel sometimes that, particularly like the Battle on Geonosis, I just felt like I was watching a video game. It all felt a little bit too created to me in places. But I mean, I am nitpicking when I say this. The actual film itself was enjoyable. I thought having the
CG version of Yoda in this film was an improvement. One of the things that bothered me with the first film, just to step back to that quickly, about Yoda was, Yoda was supposed to be 900 years old or whatever. So this film was only set, 30 something years before we see him in Empire Strikes Back. And I'm like, why have they made him look different? He wouldn't look that different. And it really bothered me that the puppet looked different and wrong. And obviously in subsequent Blu-ray and DVD releases, they've replaced him now with the digital version that looks much closer to how Yoda looked in Empire and Jedi. So I thought that was a bit of an improvement. But in terms of his character, I was always sort of bothered that Yoda had an apartment in Coruscant and kind of lived in this city. When I always kind of romanticized the idea of him living in, on a planet devoid of any technology and all of that sort of thing, and just the Force as his ally. And you had a Yoda that 1 minute would be sort of jumping around doing backflips with a lightsaber and all this, and then walking away with his walking stick, and that always bothered me slightly.
I have a lot of problems with Attack of the Clones, and if anything, it's my least favourite of these films. Firstly, I was not a big fan of the Yoda fight. For me, the Emperor seemed to be of such power that he could shoot lightning out of his fingertips, but in Attack of the Clones, it just, again, they both shoot, Dooku and Yoda both shoot lightning because they've reached whatever Jedi level. And I was just like, oh, okay. And then seeing the little CGI Yoda pull out the lightsaber and just, spin around a lot, I was like, what the fuck? This is not what I pictured Yoda to be. And then, as you say, with the joke with after that, the walking stick. I remember the reaction. Everybody was like, yeah! I'm sitting there going, really?
It's kind of stupid.
In my screening, it got about 10 seconds of cheating and about a minute of laughing. When Yoda's CGI came on. Keith, I think your point about like the films being a bit kind of glitchy and computer gamey, to me, that's part of the charm of Star Wars from the beginning. It's undoubtedly like a series where the special effects are game changing. Every time a film comes out, there's something in it where I just think that's the best I've ever seen it being done. But for every one of those, there's the face replacement on Count Dooku's stunt double and things like that, where Christopher Lee is delivering his lines, and then all of a sudden there's some guy doing acrobatics, and the special effect there just doesn't work. But I love that. I think that's awesome. To me, that's part of Star Wars. And I think that this film, like the entire prequel trilogy, it demonstrates that. For every bit it gets spectacularly right, there's other parts where you just want to look away from the screen and put your fingers in your ears.
I think the problem with the prequel films is it's been about the technology. Everyone is about pushing the technology. I mean, it was all shot on green screen. You have these massive battles. But the problem was there was never any stakes. The story suffered because of all this technology. Because everything was sort of, because you didn't, for a start, I never felt like they were actually there doing these things. Now, okay, some of the stuff that they do in these films, you couldn't do. You can get a stamp man, whizzing through the city of Coruscant on a droid or hanging off ships or, because it'd probably kill them. We don't have flying cars, but there you go. Okay, there's certain things where you use CGI, but they use CGI for everything. And it made a lot of the scenes kind of boring. I mean, there was a lot of scenes in rooms where people, there's a scene where Amidala's packing and Anakin's talking to her. And that was like, okay, it's boring, You're just sort of, again, it's a lot of this stuff happens in rooms, but you it's not real. You can feel the fakeness. So I think that's been its main problem, is that the focus has been on pushing the technology. Look at this fantastic creature we've made, but it's kind of like he's there, he's gone. I mean, Attack of the Clones, you had I can never remember the character's name, but the owner of the 50s diner that just happens to be in Coruscant. Nodding, yeah, George, we get it. It's a big nod to American Graffiti. We got it. But, he's there for one scene and he's never seen again. Yet him and Obi-Wan are great friends, and, and he's also the guy to go if you want to know things. It's like, and then I think the whole mystery thing was a bit stupid. When he goes to the planet with the clones, and he's on the holo phone to Yoda, go, "Did we order a clone army?" I think alarm bells would be ringing. No, we didn't, and we certainly didn't want to use the DNA from Jango Fett. So
because
yeah.
The mystery is that it's Palpatine that's been pulling all the strings and consolidating power, isn't it? Is that?
Yeah.
That's a
yeah, which is, it doesn't work. Unless you're literally watching these in chronological order,
yeah.
Okay, it really doesn't make sense, because to the fans of the original, trilogy, we know that Palpatine is going to become the Emperor anyway. So this whole, who is this Darth Sidious character? It's like, well, it's pretty bloody obvious, really, isn't it?
Yeah, and also
again, that didn't work.
No, and also his plan again, it needed to sort of, it only works if all these things happen, and luckily enough for him, they do. He's not it's this weird thing where I always thought that the Emperor's rise to power was due to being, yes, manipulative, but also being opportunist as well. This Clone War comes along and he uses that opportunity to seize power. That's how it would work in the real world as well. Not that the fact that he would orchestrate this whole thing from the very beginning. So Phantom Menace was him, becoming the was it Counselor or Grand Council or whatever, whatever the head of the Republic is. And then the second one is starting this war. And then the third one is then, seizing power. It's a lot of coincidences and luck that, his plan falls into place.
Yeah. It was a bit like we were saying in the DC one about the Batman v Superman thing, about how a lot of that, again, was very coincidental rather than the plan being really solid, and you've got a similar thing here, haven't you?
I think it needed to be in, well, I'll just ignore that slight against Lex's amazing master plan there. But I think my problem with the depiction of Palpatine was it needed to be a lot more Shakespearean and sort of Machiavellian rather than opportunistic. He's not, again, it's about agency for me. He's not shown, I think, in the prequel trilogy as being manipulative enough. Of course, you get the shots where he's kind of, Ian McDiarmid's just, grinning and sort of smiling and putting on the performance and stuff. But there wasn't enough presented in the dialogue, I think, where you could see him in his performance planning in his head. And I think that needed to be a bigger part of it.
Yeah, exactly. Because they were playing the game of, well, we don't know who this Darth Sidious guy is. And that's how the films come across. But to the audience, I think that's why a lot of Star Wars fans hate these films, is that they felt like they were being treated as being stupid. Yeah. It's like, we know exactly who Darth Sidious is. We know who Palpatine is. Stop playing the stupid game with us. We know it. Just show us. We want to see him. We want to see him in action. We want to see him come up with his evil plan. We want to see how he comes to destroy the Republic and build the Empire. And then when it happens, you're just like, what? God, this is so crap. It's really...
We're watching these films as adults, and I think the prequel trilogy was definitely made as a series for children, like a new generation to enjoy Star Wars. Whereas I think the new stuff is being made for people in their 30s and 40s to go and watch as a legitimate kind of film, and it happens to be child-friendly enough that you could bring your kids. Whereas I think the prequel trilogy was a family movie. You know, it was child friendly and sort of designed that way.
Yeah, I mean, and so it was weird then that the third film was like a 12.
Yeah, those kids have got
Well, yeah.
They've already seen 8 years of the 1 and 2.
Yeah, I mean, before we move
Yeah, I mean,
on to
it got dark, didn't it?
yeah, before we move on to Revenge of the Sith, my other main problems with Attack of the Clones is Anakin Skywalker. When Obi-Wan Kenobi describes Anakin Skywalker to Luke Skywalker in A New Hope, he looks back on a fondness of a friend that he'd lost. Not on a whiny, petulant kid who felt he was better than everybody, who clearly was going to join the dark side, and had no real redeeming features about him. I mean, his way of proclaiming his love to Amidala was, I mean, really, I mean, it's like he came across as a stalker. He, you know, and also this whole thing about Jedis and senators cannot fall in love. Love is forbidden. I mean, especially when she's wearing the most, like, that black outfit was kind of like, you know, it's kind of sexy.
Oh, yes.
It's kind of sexy. And she's going, but Anakin,
very sexy.
Anakin, we can't. It's forbidden. And it's like, Jesus, girl, you're a dick tease wearing that.
Yeah.
You know, going, we can't.
You got one of the sexiest actresses in the world. You're right.
Yeah.
A very sexy attire and lots of midriff and whatever going on in that second film. But yeah, I mean, which is again interesting as it's supposed to be a child-friendly thing. But yeah, I mean, you know, to talk about Hayden Christensen briefly, you know, he didn't have a lot of great material to work with in terms of the way some of this was scripted, to be fair. Yeah. But at the same time, I often wonder, I mean, you know, the rumour mill for a long time was going around that like Leonardo DiCaprio could have been potentially attached to playing the role. And I do think to myself, my God, if you've got a great actor like Leonardo DiCaprio, you know, who is clearly one of the best of the current generation of actors out there, to play, you know, a role like Anakin Skywalker, you know, what it might have been, because you know, he was supposed to be this, like you said, he'd been really bigged up in the original trilogy, and you know, he was supposed to be this really intriguing character, you know, with tons of charisma, you know, the best star pilot in the galaxy, a really close friend on, you know, a cunning warrior, you know, all of these sort of things. And yeah, it does feel like a lot of that development gets very skipped over in this film. You know, that turns into being very much about spectacle. One of the other things about this
can I just hold up? Can I just Can I just address the Leonardo DiCaprio thing? Because yeah, I agree. It would have been good to have him in the part, but the part was badly written. Yes. At the end of the day, the part was badly written. Yeah. So no matter what actor was playing it, it still would have come across the same way. There would be no saving it by whatever actor you were in, because a lot of the actors of that age would be looking up to Lucas anyway, as, you know, as like being this amazing filmmaker, and would agree with everything he said. You got to remember, in the original trilogy, you know, the actors were mocking the scripts. You remember Harrison Ford's famous line, "You can write this shit, but you can't say it." You know?
Can't say it, yeah.
Yeah. So, unfortunately, every actor that was appearing in these prequels loved the originals, so would treat Lucas's words as gospel. There was nobody there who was going to, you know, say anything. I mean, Ewan McGregor has gone on many shows and, you know, and stories and everything saying that you know, how much he hated working on those films, how he found the dialogue stilted, how, you know, but every time you saw him on behind the scenes, he was like, oh, I'm having a great time. Well, hey, ooh, lightsabers, woo, you know. So there's...
Yeah, and he was very lucky to be there. He shouldn't have been slagging it all off, you know what I mean? But
I know, but the end of the day, there's, again, you're presented with these scripts, and I think this is the main problem with these prequels are the stories they're telling, the scripts. And you know, you have a character like Anakin Skywalker who clearly is going to become Darth Vader. There is not this tragic fall from grace, because there was no grace to start off with. You know, he admits to Amidala that he wants power, that he wants more. You know, and also a way of getting your girl, guys, is telling them about how you slaughtered a whole village of sand people.
Women and children too.
Women and children too. And crying about it. I mean, what's
interesting about Hayden Christensen, again, sorry, just before you move on, because obviously he's the core component in this film. Like you've just said, Simon, the character's so bigged up in A New Hope that when you get him as an adult, it's kind of, I think, he's the wrong casting choice. The part's written really badly. And also, because he's an actor at the start of his career, he doesn't do what I wish he'd done with a director like George Lucas, which is just ignore everything he said and do his own thing. Now, I've trained as a director. I've directed actors. I've made my own films. It's happened to me where I've been directing somebody and they haven't really taken my direction on board and have done their own thing. That's not what you want. Sometimes it can yield a better result. I'm thinking specifically of Terminator Salvation, where Christian Bale, I imagine, just ignored everything McGee said and turned in a performance so good it makes the film look even worse than it is. But I think that's what might have saved Hayden Christensen's performance for me, is if he had the maybe the experience to have just thought, right, well, I don't really think George has got a clue here. I'm going to do my own thing. But because he was a young actor, start of his career, and it's a massive role, maybe he was right to just work with what he was given.
I have to say we'd all like the opportunity to get to do something like that, wouldn't we? But
I just want to just say something about directing there for a second there, William. If actors go off and do their own things, I think you really need to put your foot down, because at the end of the day, if it's something that you haven't agreed with the actor, then you will find that them running off and doing their own thing is a bad thing at the end of the day. Even if the results they yield are good, most of the time the results are pretty bad. I'm not saying that actors should be on automatons, but what I'm saying is that if an actor wants to do something different, then they should be able to approach you and talk to you about it, and not just go and do it. You know, and if you see that happening in the future, William, please go over to him and start talking to him about it, because it's, at the end of the day, you as a director, you will regret that you didn't say anything.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, I think, film is a collaborative medium, and when people aren't collaborating with each other, it's to the detriment of the film,
exactly.
To the detriment of the final product. Totally. I think it's important, I think, to also just say, there's so much of film discussion where people never ever say anything that paints themselves in a bad light or admit that they make a mistake and stuff. And I don't like that. In any job that I've had, whenever I've made a mistake, I've been like, I messed up. And for me, especially with creative stuff, when I fuck it up, that's when I get most excited to realise how to do something the right way or a better way. So that's definitely my most informative experiences directing have usually come out of an experience that I didn't particularly enjoy at the time. But that's how you make it better in the future.
That's right. You learn from the bad experiences.
Yeah, I mean, film is definitely, it is the director's medium, but at the same time, it is very much a collaboration. Really, you hire good actors because you want to see what they're going to bring to something as well. And to be fair to the cast of Attack of the Clones, I think you're both right in terms of the actual script itself. They didn't have a great deal to work with here. I mean, this is where I think that the prequels if you want to say they go wrong, this is where I think they go a bit. Is this is supposed to be, this story, as George Lucas often says, it's supposed to be the rise and fall of Anakin Skywalker. That's what the saga is. And unfortunately, the films themselves, the prequel films themselves, rely very much on spectacle and less on the sort of character development and things of that nature, which kind of lets it down. I mean, one of the other issues I've got with Attack of the Clones is, particularly towards the beginning of the film, is everybody seems to be able to defy gravity, and almost like being a Jedi Knight means you can practically fly. And again, when you compare that to like Luke hanging from Bespin at the end of Empire Strikes Back, where you're really worried that he could fall and there are stakes there. When they're at the beginning in that sort of pod chase thing, and they're all sort of leaping from vehicle to vehicle, not only didn't I believe anything I was seeing, but there really seemed to be no problem. It's like, oh, no worries, I'll just jump and grab onto something else that's flying, and then I'll jump from that and do a somersault and grab onto something else that's flying. And you're thinking, okay, I know these are Jedi Knights, but at the same time, they're not Superman. So, I have niggles with it, but I do think Episode 2 is an evolution and an improvement on Attack of the Clones. On Phantom Menace for sure. But again, it would have been nice if we got more of this character development around Anakin, and we saw more arc to his character than the abrupt one that we end up getting, where he sort of changes to bad pretty quickly, and he falls in love pretty quickly and then changes to evil pretty quickly. And that's just the construction of the films, unfortunately.
So Revenge of the Sith, I didn't rush out to see this one. I remember the press at the time. This is the darkest Star Wars ever. It's dark. Get ready, guys. It's going to be dark. We get to see Darth Vader. It's going to be dark. And it was, probably about as well. I mean, I have to say, Empire felt darker than this does. I think, again, Revenge of the Sith, it's a lot of spectacle. It has this weird tonal shift where at the beginning we're having a fun adventure. We're here to rescue this Palpatine, and and then you have this beheading where Anakin is tricked into executing Dooku, and then we're off to stop the war, and then the war ends, and then now we're killing Jedis, and we're killing the Separatists, and the Empire is rising, and then we have a 30-minute lightsaber battle, which is the most dullest duel I have ever seen in my life.
It's amazing how they went from the end of the Phantom Menace with Ray Park and Ewan McGregor, and that is probably my favourite sword fight, I think, on film. I think it's absolutely incredible, the stunt work in that and the choreography.
Yeah.
Brilliant stuff.
Yeah.
To that, the battle where, I'm convinced that the sort of method of sword fighting and stuff should be done in the sort of Sergio Leone kind of Akira Kurosawa way, where the actual action is totally, one sword strike or one gunfire. That's it. And it's all the talking and the build-up and the sort of filmmaking part of it that lends weight. And in this film, they just completely wrecked it at the end. It's awful. In fact, that's what I was sort of going over in my head just when you were talking about it there, Simon. I had a girlfriend at uni who, when this came out, was a massive Hayden Christensen fan that loved him. So I saw Revenge of the Sith 3 times. I think I saw it opening night at the cinema. And for all the kind of cinematic glitz and the kind of slickness to it, and I do really like that. I think that is a pull for me on films, is the way that they look and sound and so on. This just had absolutely no soul or kind of attempt to having a heart And when you compare it to something like A New Hope, where that is just a fairy tale, I think there's none of that at all in Revenge of the Sith. It doesn't even, it doesn't even feel that bad that he became Darth Vader.
Yeah. Well, it was inevitable. I mean, again, this is a prequel problem, is that we know where this leads. I mean, but also just sort of speeding things up where, the last shot of you seeing Vader next to the Emperor, and they're looking out and they're saying, oh, wow, look, the Death Star's being created. And we know it takes about 20 years for them to complete it. But, they already got it looks like it's underway quite well. It should be ready in a year or so. So it's just these weird, Yeah. I mean,
I had a different and rather special experience actually for watching episode 3, Revenge of the Sith, because what I actually did was I went to the Empire Leicester Square, did a Star Wars day where they basically played the original trilogy, and then they played parts 1 and 2, the prequels, and then they ended with the first showing of Revenge of the Sith. Okay, so I went to this day, and it was one of, often in life, there's things that don't meet your expectations, and you build it up in your head, and then you go to it, and it's obviously not quite what you're expecting. But I have to say, this Star Wars day was completely the opposite for me. Okay, in so much I queued up and got a ticket when they went on sale, and I was working on a film called Flyboys at the time, where I was an extra. I was one of the background pilots, and I also did some stand-in work for James Franco. And I managed to get a day off to come and see this because I'd already booked it. And I was like, I'd said to the second AD, was there any chance I could get this particular day off because I had something planned? And it worked out fine, and I did. And I remember I turned up in Leicester Square really early. I thought I'll grab a bit of breakfast, and because I'm going to be in the cinema all day. I mean, it was literally sort of starting at 9 a.m. and you'd get out at like midnight or whatever. So I thought, fine. And I went, and I was blown away because they had transformed Leicester Square. Okay, you had X-Wing fighters and all sorts of Star Wars vehicles in the square. You had an orchestra right in the middle of the square playing the Star Wars music. And then you had something like 100 people dressed up as stormtroopers being marched around the square by Darth Vader, with Boba Fett taking up the rear of the group and all this sort of thing. And it was done so well. I was like, oh my God. And then you get in the cinema, and they were providing food and drink as part of your ticket price. All sorts of like goodies and whatever. Sat through the film. You had a nice little break between each film to get some food, and there were photo opportunities, like with R2-D2 and all sorts of stuff like that. And then at the end, before they put Revenge of the Sith on, you had George Lucas, Rick McCallum, Ewan McGregor, Anthony Daniels, a host of guests that came to introduce the film. And I'll never forget, although this turned out to be something not to be too excited about in the end, but George Lucas's final comment before the film started playing was, I'm on a flight out of London tomorrow to begin work on the next Indiana Jones film. And everybody went nuts. The whole audience went nuts. And I have to say, for me, I really enjoyed Revenge of the Sith. It was very dark, much darker than I was expecting, which I liked because I like dark, as you know. My only issue with it was, it's interesting what you say about the Kurosawa stuff, because obviously Lucas has always been influenced by Kurosawa, and I agree. This epic lightsaber duel at the end, where we knew Darth Vader, Anakin was going to get fall into the lava and all this stuff. That definitely could have been a bit better. And then what it felt like is, as you'd already said, Simon, the whole at the end of the film was like, oh, well, we've got to tie this in with what comes in 20 years. So it was all like, she's there and she's like, Leia, Luke. Oh, sorry, the other way around. Luke, Leia, and then she dies. And then you know, he goes, no.
Oh God!
Which is a bit laughable.
Oh, the nose.
The Death Star. It's like there's the Death Star, and then Yoda says about oh, don't worry, you'll be able to communicate with your former master, you can, and all this sort of stuff, you know. And then it's like, oh, CPO, oh, he's seen all of this, I'll wipe his memory, no worries, you know. And it's like, oh, okay, so they had to sort of tie it up in a neat bow, which didn't really sort of work right at the end. But
yeah.
Other than that, I thought the journey there was fantastic, you know. So I actually really enjoyed this one.
You just reminded me about one of the reasons why I hate these films, and that is that it's been building up to this point of Anakin becoming Darth Vader, and the whole scene is hilarious. So for one thing, Darth Vader should never say Padme. So, you know, so he wakes up and he's like, where is Padme? Oh, Lord Vader, in your anger, you killed her. No. And this whole no thing has haunted Star Wars ever since. I mean, the fact that they put the no into Return of the Jedi in one of the special editions reissues. I think it was
That's awful, but
yeah, exactly. And it was like, well, they just put it in to tie it up with the prequels. It's like, stop it. That's why I was so happy that George Lucas sold the rights to Star Wars, because he just couldn't stop meddling with it.
That's a trademark of his sort of style as a director, Simon, and you don't want to see that.
No,
you can't leave it alone. You know,
can't leave it alone.
I'm in total agreement that he's making the films worse. The more he change stuff like that, the worse that they are. Like the Ewok song being altered and stuff like that, like just rubbish.
Yeah.
But that's his thing. That's one of his favourite things to do, is go back in and like, oh, let's just spend $100,000 putting in this CGI Yoda when we already had a puppet.
Yeah,
amazing. Like, I'm always happy to watch the original, the prequel trilogy, just for those sorts of crazy things that he does.
He's trying to be like the artist Goya, who used to keep painting over his own paintings, you know, because he wasn't satisfied with them.
Yeah.
And yeah, Lucas keeps, I mean, every time it's until he sold it, every time it was released on home media, they'd make another little change somewhere, and it would be like, leave it alone.
And it's infuriating, you know. It sticks out like a sore thumb, especially if you've seen the film as a child, you know, 100 times or whatever. You then watch it and think, wait a minute, what's that?
Well, I mean, if you should check out the despecialized editions of the original trilogy.
Okay.
I saw them like a year ago, and what a breath of fresh air. Just to sit back and watch them as you originally saw them as a kid. It was like, this is so good. Just because, well, no, seriously, because at first when the special editions came out, you know, you didn't really question the changes. It's like, well, we just want to update a few things. And it's like, fine. And at first they were fine, apart from the scene with Jabba. You know, you didn't want to see, you know, Jabba the Hutt in the spaceport in Mos Eisley, because his scene was taken out and then his dialogue was given to Greedo, and so you have Greedo saying exactly the same thing that Jabba says to Han. So we just got a repeat of information, and you know, and also a bit of added fan service for the fans to have, you know, well, look, there's Boba Fett. Now he's in all 3 films. See? Well, hey, you know, he's your favourite. You liked old Boba, and here he is.
There's almost this thing as well that happens. It's not specific to Star Wars, but you know, all this talk of a Boba Fett film. I hate that, because the whole point about Boba Fett being a badass is he just stands there. You know, he's got like 2 or 3 lines max. That's why he's awesome. And then to be having a whole film and the backstory of it, you know, it's like this Scorsese produced Joker standalone that Warner Brothers were talking about doing last month. You don't want an origin story for a character like the Joker. Like that's the wrong direction to go in. And I think with Boba Fett, like possibly my favourite Star Wars character. I don't know. I've not been on a big Star Wars kick over the last 10 years, but this is not the right sort of direction to take this kind of part of the franchise in. I think he's good because people know nothing about him. I would rather just steer it in the belly of the Sarlacc.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, he is the man with no name character. You don't know anything about him, and that's what makes him intriguing. But I do think with the Disney films that there's going to come a point where it's just going to become so oversaturated that it's gonna lose its shine. We get a Star Wars film every year now, and it's gonna get to a point where it's just gonna be oversaturation. It's just like okay, enough now.
We used to have to wait 3 years. Yeah, we used to have to wait 3 years to the next one.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Anticipate.
Yeah.
Every year now we're getting a new one, which on one hand I think, oh yeah, that's great, and then on the other hand I think, oh yeah, maybe this is going to get tired, and they're going to dilute it too much. Is the worry, and take some of the magic away.
I'm glad they're moving away from the Skywalker saga, because it does make the Star Wars universe very small. If everything just revolves around the Skywalker family.
So no, exactly. The other thing. Sorry.
Well, on you
sorry,
go.
William. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
No, you go ahead, please.
Okay, right. Well, I was just going to drop in. Think it was the perfect time to say it. I absolutely hated The Force Awakens. Couldn't have experienced a larger, like turn off if I'd been prepared for it. Like, I was really excited to go and see the film. I love J.J. Abrams. He's, I think, a good example of what a Hollywood director can do when they play ball with the studio and they deliver what they're, agreeing. And I would say that The Force Awakens is not only J.J. Abrams' worst film, I would say like it has switched me off a little bit from automatically wanting to go and see what he puts out. And I was so excited for The Force Awakens, I took my parents to go and see it, because that's the sort of film, I think, if they're not regular cinema goers, that's the sort of film that's made for the seeing in the cinema. I just thought the film was flabby, slow, emotionless. And it's strange because if I took any one of those little parts, the cinematography, the performances, even the script, I thought was well written. They all worked and they were all at the level they needed to be at. But when I watched the film, I couldn't get away from the fact that I was just being advertised at, and that there was no real, I thought, point or meaning to the story. It didn't have any of the charm of the original trilogy or any of the kind of bizarre fascination of the prequel trilogy. I just thought, I'm done, I'm out. And I saw the next one, Rogue One. I thought it was better, but that's about it. So yeah, I hate the new stuff.
So obviously not looking forward to seeing The Last Jedi then.
I think my friend is excited to take me, so I'm looking forward to not disappointing him and attending. It's not a film I'm interested in going to go out of my way to see. If my friends are going to the cinema and that's what we're seeing, fine. But I'm not enthusiastic to give more money to a non-Lucas Star Wars trilogy. Though saying that, I think is that Rian Johnson is going to be doing the new Unconnected trilogy.
That's correct. Yeah.
If they'd started with that, I think I might have been much more ready to kind of be open-minded about it. But I really hate the new stuff. They're just dreadful.
Yeah, but I mean, the way studios work at the moment, they never have gone that way. They would have gone, well, no, we must continue the sort of Star Wars saga because, it's Star Wars. And we've got to have Luke Skywalker. We've got to have Han Solo. We've got to have Princess Leia. We've got to have people that, that the audience will recognise because that's what we're into at the moment. We don't do new things. We do, recycling things. If an audience has heard of it, we're going to make it.
So I might have even been a bit happy if I'd felt like they were going to just be going back to the Luke Skywalker story, but that's not what I thought was happening in The Force Awakens, I thought they were doing a sort of retroactive continuity wipe of the prequel trilogy and presenting to the audience, this is the Star Wars you got from your childhood. And I remember when the teaser came out for The Force Awakens, I really liked how it was being presented, which was, you know, the X-Wing strafing across the bay and the stormtroopers inside that, troop carrier all being like shuggled around and stuff. And I just thought, fantastic, Abrams gets it. He's going to be delivering a film that is, hyper stylized in a very realistic way in this completely fantastic sort of story. And really none of that mattered, because the story is just about kind of making sure that people know that this is the original trilogy style and not, Hayden Christensen and midichlorians and Jar Jar Binks. And, I would rather they'd taken those kind of risks and had them not pay off. I might have been more sympathetic as a viewer, but it just strikes me as, ultra safe, risk averse, great business model filmmaking, which is not really of any interest to me other than to read about it.
Well,
Okay.
I mean, that was the thing I liked about Force Awakens was the fact that it was like, hey guys, this is the Star Wars you grew up with. It was that made me sort of relax into it, because it was like, it's not midichlorians, it's not Jedis who are totally invincible. Though saying that, I have a few problems with the character of Rey. I do agree with the whole Mary Sue thing. She does seem to be a character who's written in, who seems to know a lot for somebody who's an orphan stranded on a desert planet, whose only goal in life is to clean, is to get parts, clean them and get them for food. I mean, when Han Solo mentions the fact that, this sort of Jedi temple exists, she knows about it. And it's like, how would you know about it? And the whole how she becomes one with the Force is very quick. I mean, literally, she's in a torture chamber, and Kylo Ren is trying to force the information out of her about where the BB-8 droid is, and then suddenly, hey, she's one with the Force. And and also I think
Using the Force.
Sorry?
It can't be that special being a Jedi or being a Sith. You just shut your eyes and it just happens.
Yeah. So it's and for somebody who hadn't really displayed any kind of Force powers before that, I mean, I can understand it if she was on Jakku and she was secretly using the Force, then yeah, that would make sense. But suddenly, she goes from being Luke Skywalker in A New Hope to Luke Skywalker in Return of the Jedi. I mean, fucking hell, she does the mind trick and everything. Yeah, it's like that's very quick.
Yeah, we've no 4 years in between.
Exactly. Yeah.
I mean, hopefully this new movie will address and explain some of that. And I'm quite pleased to see where we end up. Where they finish the song, if you like, for the original characters before they go off into other directions with the Star Wars universe, which could be interesting. I mean, back to the prequels real quick. One of the things, I mean, obviously, Revenge of the Sith. I think the ending of it, with the birth of Luke and Leia and the death of Amidala and all that sort of thing is all very, very rushed and could have been done a lot better. It was almost like just a tie-in.
And Keith, what did she die of?
A broken heart.
A broken heart, isn't it?
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah. I mean,
how fairy tale do you want to be? Yeah.
It's like, really? Seriously, you go with that?
Yeah. It could have been much better. But one of the things about all of it, and again, this is where we go back to sort of what fan expectations were and what headcanon might have been and all this sort of thing, is, we all thought from that one line in A New Hope about the Clone Wars that the prequels were actually going to be possibly about the Clone Wars. And apart from, a little bit at the end of episode 2 and a little bit at the beginning of episode 3, they kind of jump over that and obviously make it about the whole Anakin Skywalker to Darth Vader story, and then obviously to please the fans with the Clone Wars, they make an entire, separate animated series about Clone Wars. But I mean, I don't know whether Disney and Lucasfilm, in terms of where they go with Star Wars in separate trilogies and stuff, whether or not they will go back and do anything about the Clone Wars as such, or whether they'll just move on and go off in another direction at all. That remains to be seen, I guess.
I'm just looking forward to the ultimate, rebooting of all the films, so that we can see the rebooted version of the prequel trilogy, original trilogy, and now Disney's new trilogy. But that'll be for another 30, 40 years. So that's the stuff we're looking forward to, is like in 25 years' time or whatever, people are going to remake all of them. So I think that's inevitable. I think this makes so much money, Star Wars, they can't let it die. Yeah. And that they're right to put out a film.
You're a decade younger than us. You're a decade younger than us, William. So you're allowed to see that. The first unit. No, you got to hope that you'll be in good condition for seeing the rebooted Phantom Menace.
Yeah, William, you just reminded me of something, and that was that I had a fear after Revenge of the Sith came out that they were going to reboot the original trilogy, and that fear came from a painting I saw of Luke and Leia as if they were Hayden Christensen's and Natalie Portman's children. No, seriously.
That's one to buy, Simon, and then put your wall.
But the thing is, the thing was that you could see that. I don't know if Lucas would do it, possibly, because that would be the ultimate going back and redoing everything that he ever wanted to do to it. But it felt like a real fear that, he's done these prequels and he wants them to tie up with the originals, but the originals and the prequels don't match up. They really don't match up, especially the look, especially the sort of, the continuity. So what better way to do it than to reboot the original trilogy and have actors who look like they were the children of the prequel characters. And
sounds absolutely like a conversation that would have been, mulled over for hours and hours at Lucasfilm and at the studio. I'm sure that those discussions did happen. Saying that, I would watch those films. I would watch George Lucas make, his 7, 8, and 9th Star Wars films as reboots of his original trilogy. I think what's really interesting for me at the moment, because I don't feel very connected to the current Star Wars that are coming out, is what's George Lucas doing next? And has he got anything on the horizon? Which I don't know. Presumably he's having a really nice extended holiday. But I think if he makes more films, that could be really interesting.
Well, this is the kind of thing, the bad thing about the Star Wars films when it comes to George Lucas's career, because when he started off, he was actually a very interesting filmmaker. I really rate THX 1138. I think that's a great film, an amazing visual film with a really interesting concept and story. I enjoy American Graffiti. And yes, the original Star Wars trilogy was great, and the Indiana Jones trilogy was great. But then he never really went from that into, making more interesting films. Yes, he did Howard the Duck, which, yeah. And he did.
Marvel are going to do that now, aren't they?
Yeah. I mean,
get George Lucas in to direct it. I think he's the perfect sort of person to do it.
I think George should do what Francis did. Francis Ford Coppola, which is obviously where George started out anyway. He had his success with his great movies, and now he's gone back to doing smaller, more personal projects. And I think with George has always been a pioneer and an innovator. And I think he obviously doesn't have to worry about paying the bills or anything like that anymore. So I think that he should maybe go back to being an experimental filmmaker and doing things that interest him and seeing what he can come up with, because he's definitely got the resource to do it. So why not? It just depends whether he can be bothered now, I suppose.
I don't think he can be bothered. I mean, just look at the prequels. I mean, just look how they were made. They were all made in studio. He was always sat behind some monitors. It was all green screen. It was, I mean, even
he never enjoyed production, did he? He admits that himself. He never, which is why he, didn't direct the second two, and also why he got Spielberg to make the Indiana Jones films. Was he always said that he liked creating the characters and he liked working on the edits and all this, but the actual production part, particularly with the things he wanted to do, as they were so complicated, he never enjoyed that much. So I guess being able to work in a studio, in a green studio with cameras on cranes and whatever, and an editing suite built there, was probably heaven for him when he was making those prequels. I guess,
but not as us as viewers. I mean, this is the thing. As a filmmaker,
no, definitely not.
As a filmmaker, the thing is, you want a bit of adversity. You want something that, because if you go in and you make the film that you set out to make, it's usually not that interesting, to tell the truth. What makes films interesting is the stuff that comes up, out of the location you're filming at, or the conditions you're in. I mean, take the opening scene out of Gladiator. It wasn't in the script that it starts snowing halfway through it. It just happened. And Ridley Scott had the best idea to say, well,
he embraced it.
He embraced it. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, this is what makes the prequels kind of, those sort of in-between scenes kind of boring, is because they're just in a studio with green screen. They can't move around much. I mean, you take the scene where, Anakin Skywalker has gone to Mace Windu and he goes, Palpatine is the Sith we're looking for. And they go to rush off and confront him. Do they run? No, they walk at a fast pace, because if they run out of studio space really quickly. If there was a set, that would have been a lot different. But no, they were in a big room with green screen, walking on a like a travelator, and everything is kind of sort of boring.
I mean, there are situations where that works, but it's like any tool in the filmmaking thing. It's you use that where it works, and then you use locations where it works. And I think the best films are when they blend the two. Absolutely, for me, part of the excitement of filmmaking, even though it is a pain in the arse, but it is, filming on location is actually quite exciting. Because you are up against the elements, and you are, there are random things that you haven't got total control of. But at the same time, some filmmakers want to be control freaks with everything. The studio definitely gives them that flexibility. So, it's horses for courses, I guess.
I think that's the best way to say it. I mean, I was just thinking when you were talking about green screen there, Simon, the thing that I think you can exploit massively with that is the opportunity to be in one place with your actors, and you'd hope spend more time turning over actually filming them perform. But I don't think that necessarily lends itself to a director like George Lucas, who, as you've highlighted, hates making films when he's on production. He doesn't like being, making the movie itself, which is fair enough. But if you have a more actor-orientated director, I think green screen is a really interesting tool. The example that springs out in my head is Sin City. But other films like Snyder loves his green screen sort of backdrops and things like that. And I think, Keith, you're totally right. It's when people can blend it in the right amount between location, studio, and digital studios. I think that's where film can be something more than its competition. And we're just at a stage where I think people are starting to figure out, right, CGI doesn't mean having a Balrog. CGI can be something a lot more kind of I don't know, unnoticeable.
Subtle.
You
Subtle.
replace the sky, for example, because you maybe just got an overcast day, but that doesn't mean you can't throw up a enormous full moon and a whole fleet of stars. So I think we're getting to a stage where the filmmakers are using these tools as filmmaking tools rather than as gimmicks in and of themselves, which is the way that Lucas uses them. The other thing that's just popped into my head is Christopher Plummer replacing Kevin Spacey in whatever movie's about to come out. I don't think Christopher Plummer's going to meet any other actors, certainly not actors that will be in the film, but I think he'll be on a green screen stage interacting with people wearing green suits probably, he'll be then digitally composited into the final shots. So I think,
I don't know, actually. From reports I've heard, they've just gone back and reshot all those scenes. Yeah.
Much easier.
Yeah. I mean, we're living in an age now where every major film has major reshoots, and a lot of the money is spent on, reshooting the film. So replacing an actor now is a lot easier. It's not we got to put them in a green screen situation, and no, they just go back with everything, all the actors, and they just reshoot those scenes. So
and you just end up with hair discontinuity. Everything else is perfect, but their hair.
Oh my God! Yes,
slightly different.
This is yes. Again, you bring up another thing about the prequels that were such a pain in the arse, is that they all went through reshoots, and you could clearly see what was reshot, and it all comes down to Ewan McGregor's hair. The first time was that he was doing a play where he had long hair and he wasn't willing to cut it, so they had to make this wig to give him the crew cut and the rat tail again. But the problem was, it did make his face look like he'd been stung by a bee. It made it look like he's swelled up. So you could tell what was a reshot. Yeah. He looks like, he's had an allergic reaction to something. Then when it comes to Attack of the Clones, it's how wispy his beard is. Because obviously for the film he'd grown a beard, and then in the reshoots they just, stuck a beard on him. But it wasn't clearly as, near to what he had. So again, reshoots, wispy beard. And then again with the third one, I think it comes down to sort of the hair and the beard. It's like a combination of the two. It's not as noticeable as the first two is, but you can still kind of tell.
Well, actually, while we're on that subject, then, what did we think? I mean, I really like Ewan McGregor. I'm very envious of his career, but I really like him. I've had the pleasure of meeting him a couple of times, and I really like him as a person and as an actor, and now a filmmaker. But I mean, what do we think of his portrayal of Obi-Wan? Are we buying that he's a young Alec Guinness? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I don't buy him as young Alec Guinness, but again, so much more could have been done with the character. It was badly written. I mean, some of his lines and stuff as well. I mean, when he's having a go at Anakin for dropping his lightsaber and says, "This is your life," again, just doesn't ring true to what the character was in the original trilogy. And as I say, with Phantom Menace, he should have been more up front and centre than Qui-Gon.
I loved.
What about you, William?
I really like Ewan McGregor's performances in the prequel trilogy. I mean, I think he understood very fast what he was doing, and that was, George Lucas's vision. Not really. I don't know how he directs his actors, other than what the actors themselves say. I don't think he's a good actor's director, based on the kind of comments people have made. But I really like it, which is Ewan McGregor's obviously, a talented actor. I really like Ewan McGregor as well. I think he's a solid performer. He's got experience of Alec Guinness's performances, presumably from watching them. And he just did his own sort of George Lucasy version of a young Alec Guinness. Fine. I love his accent. I think it's hammy, but it's the right kind of performance for those films. I think the Disney ones, the sort of direction they're going in is a lot more serious and kind of, emotionally realist. That's not what George Lucas's films are about. They're purely escapist, and I think his performance is actually really appropriate for them. I think he's one of the best parts of them. I think Natalie Portman got it as well. She's got a really sort of po-faced kind of political setup going on with her Amidala performance. But again, that's kind of, it works.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And who knows, Ewan might be coming back as Obi-Wan in future films, but who knows? And what about in terms of other characters then in the prequels? We've obviously talked about Jar Jar Binks, and we've talked about Anakin and Obi-Wan, etc. But what about, I mean, how did you feel about the droids coming back in these films?
I thought it was ridiculous that Anakin had built C-3PO. To me, C-3PO was a droid that had been in service and just happens to be, on this rebel ship when it gets attacked. And, I don't for a second believe that. I think that was a wrong move by Lucas to make, Anakin build C-3PO. And then for C-3PO and R2-D2 to be so connected to this storyline. I mean, that scene in Phantom Menace where they've just escaped the blockade and R2-D2 is introduced to Queen Amidala. It's like, oh my God, this is such fan service. It's ridiculous. It doesn't make...
Yeah, it was.
Yeah.
It was totally fan service. And the thing is, it's another one of those things that makes the Star Wars galaxy seem
Smaller.
and the Star Wars history seem so small again. The other thing I had a problem with R2 is obviously R2's clearly Lucas's sort of favourite character, and we all love R2. But at the same time, the fact that he was able to fly around everywhere with jets and whatever really bothered me, because I thought to myself, if that was the case, why, when he needed to get off the cell barge in Return of the Jedi, didn't he just fly off?
Yeah.
He can remember because he's had his memory wiped.
3PO off. Yeah, he doesn't remember. Yes.
They should have not put the droids in the prequels. I think that was a mistake, and it kind of, there was maybe as a result of that not room to create a new kind of C-3PO or R2-D2. I don't know if Jar Jar Binks would ever have fulfilled that role as much as Lucas wanted him to, but they took up so much time with the droids, they could have put it better somewhere else. Anakin, Obi-Wan, Amidala, or Jar Jar, I don't really care. But just meh. Yeah, and I don't care that he built 3PO. You don't see Anakin at any point really beyond that being some sort of technical wizard other than constructing his lightsaber, but there wasn't enough of his sort of technological ingenuity from memory. As a result of that, why show him building a droid if he's, not going to use those skills again in the future?
Exactly. I mean, also the fact that, he's supposedly this great pilot, yet he likes to do spinning. Spinning!
Yes.
I mean, the opening to Revenge of the Sith as well. I mean, there's a lot of... That whole opening sequence, yes, it's a technical wonder, to see this whole one shot where you see the space battle going on. But... I mean, some of the character motivations in it are a bit weird. I mean, Anakin worrying about some clones. They're clones. There's like loads of them. It's like, why do you worry about these guys? Where was the scene at the beginning? It's like he slaps one on the shoulder. It's like, great to see you again. There's nothing like that. It's just suddenly, oh, I must help out these clones. No, just why? Because you're a good guy. Even though in Attack of the Clones, I want to throttle you. You're so whiny. But, hey, you want to save some clones because, hey, I'm really good and I'm going to turn evil. Just remember that, guys. We're going to turn evil.
But I think almost that's another layer that is really interesting to George Lucas's, filmmaking in general, and sort of especially considering Star Wars, is the kind of morality and ethics he presents. They don't really match up with any of mine. Things like, the fact that the Jedi are supposed to be good, but then we see them doing all these things that are totally questionable, like Hayden Christensen's mother, it's Jake Lloyd's mother in the first one, is she not just left?
Yeah.
on Tatooine when Qui-Gon Jinn frees him. So it's like, what? Wait a minute, that's not really cool, Qui-Gon. I know he has to gamble him out, but they never come back
No,
or try
no.
and rescue it again.
And also you see with the younglings. Well, what a
Yeah,
horrible term.
yep.
But yeah, with the younglings, they're taken away from their parents and they're taken off to this monastery on Coruscant, as in the Jedi temple to learn the ways of the Jedi. It's never sort of explained. Are these monks? Because
What did he do?
Yeah.
Other than,
okay.
up a whole bunch of folk.
Well, they're supposed to be the guardians of the peace. They're supposed to be like the marshals in the Western. But the thing is, the marshals had their own life. They had their families and everything. So that to make the Jedi kind of these sort of weird monks, I don't know. It just doesn't work. I mean, how can you feel for people if you're sort of closeted away in this, in this temple?
But I do really like that, and I think it's amplified big time with the prequels, because this was another chance for him to kind of maybe clarify what the Jedi were and stuff.
But he doesn't clarify. He doesn't say why it's bad to fall in love with with women of the opposite sex, or just to fall in love. Because it's just a story plot to sort of have some sort of tension between Anakin and Amidala. There's nothing ever stated that they can't do this, and there's no reasons given why. It's not because they don't come across as a religion. If they were a religion, then I could understand that. It's like, well, we believe in the Force, and we believe in our purity in the Force, and we don't want to dilute that by having, thoughts about lust and love, even though, as Anakin says, they are taught to love, because to be guardians of the peace, they must feel love for other people. So it doesn't make any sense that this was put in apart from a story plot line to make there some sort of tension between Anakin and Amidala falling in love and it being a bad thing and being forbidden. There's no reason for it to be there apart from that.
Yeah. The Jedi stuff is not particularly multifaceted, is it? It's a little bit sort of two-dimensional, and that you're absolutely right. It's something they've never really explored in these stories, around the Jedi. And again, I think it being a religion and it being a supernatural force rather than a medical or a genetic thing would have been more interesting, I think. But hey, he created it, so he's done what he wanted with it, I guess.
Yes. Yeah. So guys, what are your final thoughts about the prequels?
I like them. I was going to say I love them there, but I'm just being pedantic. I like them. They're certainly, I think, the Star Wars films I'm most eager to watch if I've got the misfortune to be watching a Star Wars film at the moment. And I only say that because I've seen them, all of Star Wars films, so many times, apart from the new two. But no, they've got a special place in my heart. I think the fact that they're so messy, convoluted, and don't make any sense, I love that. It's like, that's the kind of blockbuster I want to watch. It's where somebody gives a guy like George Lucas mega bucks and lets him loose. Awesome. And that's kind of what the new ones are missing for me. I would much rather Disney bought the Star Wars IP and then said, all right, we're not going to join up our films at all, but we're going to give free rein to any directors who want to make a Star Wars film. So there you go, Spielberg. There you go, Tarantino. There you go, Catherine Bigelow. What do you want to do? That, to me, that's the sort of Star Wars film I want to see. Maybe they're going to go down those routes a bit more, but it's too connected and too sort of micromanaged at this point for me.
Interesting, yeah. I like them. I will say like them. I don't have the love for these that I had for the original trilogy, because obviously that's what I grew up with, and this came afterwards. They are part of the official canon and part of the timeline. I wish some of the continuity was a bit better than it is. Some of it just feels a bit wedged in. But yeah, it's enjoyable enough, but it doesn't. I've seen them all a lot of times, but they don't have the watch appeal for me that the originals had. And the new ones I haven't actually watched that many times yet. So we'll see. But they are what they are. You know, we've covered it, I think.
Well, for me, I just ignore the prequels, to tell the truth. I don't return to them. I don't. Yeah, you know, yes, they're canon, but I just act as if they don't exist. It's a good way to live, actually. It's less headaches. But I mean, seriously, I just ignore them. I was like, yeah,
are they
they're
Star
there.
Wars legends for you?
Yeah, quite. Yeah,
It's part of Star Wars legends, the original, the prequel trilogy.
Yeah, because I know there's a much better story there, but also I know that it was something that the original trilogy was built upon, and really it was better to be kept in our imagination than for us to show it, because whatever George had come up with, it would never have been as good as what we as fans imagine would have happened. And I saw the films, I enjoyed them at the time, but then afterwards, after a few more viewings, sort of left a bad taste in my mouth. And I've never gone back to them. I don't buy any of these box sets. I mean, it's kind of ruined Star Wars in some sense for me. I mean, the fact also that Lucas kept changing the original trilogy, and adding all these, redundant, stupid things that really the film didn't need. And so I'm quite happy that I have copies of the original trilogy in their original state. And, I look forward to the day when, Disney is able to re-release those original films, as we saw.
I'm sure they will.
Well, the problem was that with the special editions, they actually went back to the original negatives and changed a lot of it, so that they may not exist in a decent way. The guys who've done the despecialize have gone to different sources to rebuild these films. I mean, they've had to go to like 16 millimeter copies of the film. They've had to go to Laserdisc, DVDs. I mean, the fact that you remember there was a DVD release of the special editions which had the originals on
yes,
it, and
I have them.
Yeah. And it was they were so crap. They were 4x3, 4x3 letterbox. I mean, it was a real thumbing his nose to us. Yeah,
I was pissed off by that. I was actually pissed off when I got them, because I bought the whole trilogy like that, and I was like, oh great, this is brilliant. I've got the special edition and I've got the original. And when I put it in and instantly found out that they weren't 16:9, I was like, what?
Yeah.
Oh my God, that sucks. And the quality of them is not that good either. They're
yeah. So, I mean, I've enjoyed these new films from Disney. I mean, I have my problems with them as well, and they'll never be anything like the original trilogy to me. I just don't have the time, really, to tell the truth, to go back and watch them. I have watched Rogue One back to back with A New Hope. And,
oh yeah, me too.
And I must admit, the reason why Rogue One is kind of there is to, fill in a plot point from the original that people had problems with. But at the end of the day, the fact that the Death Star had a design flaw was the fact that it was such a small thing that the Empire thought, well, this can't harm us. I mean, clearly they thought it must have been some sort of threat, that they had a trench with lots of laser cannons on it protecting it. Otherwise, the rebels would have just flown down to it, popped two photon torpedoes down the shaft and flown off, and, boom. So the fact that it was this character's revenge on the Empire was like, oh, really? Okay, oh, yeah. I mean, I enjoyed the film. I enjoyed the second half a lot more than I enjoyed the first half. I think the whole sort of, as I say, trying to fill in a plot point, which I never had a problem with, was wrong, but there it is. And as I say, I really enjoyed Force Awakens. I've watched it a few times since. I enjoyed the new characters. I enjoy the fact that you've got the older characters kind of, there as well. And I know it's going to be like a send off for those guys. I mean, I'll be surprised if Luke Skywalker makes it to the end of this trilogy. Yeah.
Yeah, I think his days are numbered.
Yeah,
certainly. I don't know. I mean, with the new films, I just feel like these are no longer George Lucas movies, and that was the only thing really to me that was of particular interest. You can make a Star Wars film, you can buy the IP, but you can't, make a George Lucas Star Wars film if you don't include him, which they obviously are desperate to not do.
Yeah, but I agree with that decision. I think he's done a lot of damage to those films. He just can't let them be, and the end of the day, it's good now that it's taken out of his hands. I mean, is the work of the same quality? No, but then I think the thing as well is that with the original trilogy, he had a lot more time to come up with the storylines.
Yeah.
For him. I mean, he
definitely shows.
Yeah, and at the moment we're especially, I mean, prequels and these new films. The problem is that they were in a factory situation, that they needed to get these films out, and it's like the scripts are kind of taken a step back with the prequels, and then with these new ones, the scripts have been a lot better, but then you see that they have their problems as well. I mean, the fact that they have to now go back and reshoot everything, or more, most of the film. You do wonder what the original film for Rogue One was.
Yeah, well, that's kind of my gripe. I think a lot of the time with commercial Hollywood right now is that I feel like so often filmmakers' visions are micromanaged, and the studio obviously are paying so much money to make these films. Like this Star Wars stuff. I empathize with that. It's a business. It's not art for them. It's entertainment as an industry. Saying that, I would much rather see a film that's a miss, a la the prequel trilogy, that was at least 100% the vision of its director, than watch something that's been chopped, reshot, rescored, rewritten, and then packaged. I did enjoy Rogue One. Like, I'll give it a solid 2.5 out of 5, but that's it. It's not an interesting film to me.
Okay. Well, look. To end this on a positive note, then, what I would like to say is I think all respect in the world to George Lucas for creating this galaxy, this universe, this Star Wars world, and this story and these characters. Fantastic what he's done with that, and he's not only changed the film industry in the process of doing so, but he's also created something there that's spanned multimedias and thousands upon hours of entertainment. So that's great. In terms of the moving forward, I think he's set this universe up, this galaxy up, and I think Let's let new filmmakers take it and do new things with it and take it in other directions. And if they're going to do that, then I'm excited to see more. Basically, that's all I've got to say on it.
I think you're absolutely right. Respect to George Lucas for creating it all and delivering so much. 6 films is loads for one series for any filmmaker, I think. So kudos. He's certainly a filmmaker I admire and got a lot of time for. And in terms of Disney stuff, I'm going to watch them. Maybe not at the cinema. It might be the sort of thing that I wait for Netflix. I know that's probably going to appall a lot of Star Wars fans, of which I consider myself one. But,
small screen.
I'm not. Well, nah, I'm not that invested in them. But I am interested to see what filmmakers like Gareth Evans and Ryan Johnson and the people who are making them are doing. We'll see. I'm certainly listening. I've got my ear on the ground for any Star Wars related kind of developments and so on. It's something that I am still aware of. Whether or not I'll be... I think I'm more interested for the non-sequel trilogy, actually. Talking has kind of clarified that. But yeah, George Lucas, it's thanks to him that we've got all this and have the kind of information to discuss and the kind of responses that are conflicting with his prequel trilogy. You know, that if we didn't have George Lucas, then we wouldn't have Star Wars.
Yep, I agree with that. So, William, where can people follow you?
They can get me on Twitter at WAS_MCL. That's probably I'm not particularly social media savvy, more of an email kind of phone call kind of guy. But I'll keep those bits of information for now. You guys have got them.
And Keith, where can people find out more about yourself?
Okay, if you want to see short films that I've made, if you go to British Eyles, that's EYLES on YouTube, there are some short films there. Alternatively, if you put my name into IMDb, you can see things that I've been working on there. And obviously, you can get in touch through the podcast.
And as always, you can find my work at independentrunnings.com. You can listen to this podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, YouTube, and all good podcast providers. You can follow us on Facebook and Twitter. Just search Movie Heaven, Movie Hell. And please leave us a rating and review on iTunes and Stitcher. It all helps. So that just leaves me to thank our guest, William, for coming on.
Well, thank you as well for having me back.
It was a pleasure.
Love talking to you guys. Love hearing what your thoughts on my opinions are, because obviously I've worked with you a lot, Simon. So that's always fun.
And hopefully you'll join us for the next episode of Movie Heaven, Movie Hell.
I've got a bad feeling about this.
We're gonna die.
Maybe to me the Jedi are evil.